Pirates versus the Royal Navy. The early 18th century was the Golden Age of Piracy, when the Caribbean was less a paradise and more a hunting ground. Merchant ships sailed heavy with sugar, rum, gold, and slaves. Rich prizes for men who feared no flag and bowed to no king. The oceans belonged not to crowns or empires, but to those willing to spill blood for them. For decades, pirates thrived in these waters. Nassau became their haven, a lawless port where rum flowed like water and alliances were sealed with blades instead of treaties. Here, captains like Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Calico Jack gathered crews of desperate men and women, offering something no navy could: freedom. A sailor might trade his life for a handful of coins on a merchant vessel, but with the Jolly Roger flying overhead, he could win a fortune, or at least die trying. The seas boiled with their defiance. Ships were taken in broad daylight, their crews forced to join or left adrift in the waves. Villages along the coast paid protection fees to avoid being burned to the ground. And always, the black flag struck terror before a single cannon fired. To see the skull and crossbones on the horizon was to know that mercy was no longer in reach. But their freedom came at a cost. The pirate tide grew so strong that the great powers of Europe could no longer ignore it. Merchants demanded protection, governors cried out for order, and kings, humiliated by ragged men who mocked their authority, sent word to the most powerful fleet on earth, the Royal Navy. At first, the Navy underestimated them. How could a rabble of cutthroats stand against the might of His Majesty's warships? But the pirates were clever. They knew the islands, the shoals, the hidden bays. They struck where the Navy was weakest and melted away before reinforcements could arrive. For a time, it seemed the pirates had the advantage. But the king's patience had limits. Orders were given, not to chase pirates from the sea, but to eradicate them. No quarter was to be shown, no mercy granted. And so began a war that would turn the Caribbean into a graveyard of ships. The pirates had ruled as kings without crowns, but now a greater power was coming. The Union Jack rose on the horizon like a storm cloud, and with it came the thunder of war. When the Royal Navy's full wrath descended on the Caribbean, the age of easy plunder ended overnight. What had once been open waters turned into a battlefield, with every horizon hiding the silhouette of a warship. The pirates, who once laughed at the sight of merchant sails, now grew wary of the white and red ensigns snapping in the wind. The Navy had a simple mission: hunt them down, corner them, and hang them. No longer would governors barter with cutthroats. No longer would merchants beg for protection. The orders came from London itself, and the sea shook under their iron resolve. Squadrons of frigates patrolled the trade routes, their decks bristling with cannons, their crews disciplined to the last man. Unlike the pirates, half-drunk, half-starved, always one storm away from mutiny, the Navy sailed with precision. And where pirates relied on speed and terror, the Navy wielded sheer power. The hunters grew ruthless. Ships suspected of harboring pirates were boarded without hesitation. Coastal villages that had once offered sanctuary found themselves under siege. Any man caught with a cutlass and no papers was branded an outlaw. And those unlucky enough to be captured alive were dragged back to port, paraded in chains, and hanged before jeering crowds. Yet the pirates did not vanish so easily. For every captain lost, another rose. Blackbeard slipped through their grasp more than once, his black flag vanishing into shoals where no frigate dared follow. Charles Vane struck like lightning, capturing ships within sight of British forts, then disappearing into the night. Calico Jack, reckless and cunning, turned the very inlets of Jamaica into traps for his prey. The war became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Navy's ships were stronger, but the pirates knew the Caribbean like no charts could show. Hidden coves, reefs sharp enough to gut a frigate, islands without names, all became their refuge. But even the cleverest outlaw knew the truth. The noose was tightening. Men began to whisper that the sea itself had turned against them. Where once the horizon meant opportunity, it now promised death. And still, the pirates fought back, their desperation sharpening their blades. Every encounter grew bloodier. Every skirmish left more corpses drifting in the tide. The Caribbean had become a vast hunting ground. Only now the pirates were the prey. The sun had barely risen when the silence shattered. From the horizon came the thunder of war, cannon fire echoing across the sea, sails snapping in the wind, and the clash of two worlds colliding. A pirate brigantine, sleek and fast, had been spotted shadowing a merchant convoy off the coast of Hispaniola. The pirates struck before dawn, swarming the lumbering vessels with grappling hooks and pistols, their laughter carrying over the surf as they looted cargo holds heavy with sugar and silver. It should have been another easy prize. But fate and the Royal Navy had other plans. Out of the mist came a frigate, 36 guns bristling from its sides, its Union Jack unfurling like a judgment. The pirates froze as the Navy bore down, the wind at its back, its decks lined with red-coated Marines ready to spill blood. The first broadside split the air. The roar of iron shot tore through the brigantine's hull, splintering wood and sending bodies tumbling into the sea. The pirates scrambled, some firing muskets in panic, others screaming to cut the ropes and flee. Their captain bellowed for order, but chaos had already claimed them. Still, they were not cowards. Grapeshot tore through their sails, but they answered with their own cannons, belching fire at the frigate's bow. The sea churned with smoke and blood as the two ships traded volleys, each broadside shaking the very bones of their crews. At such close range, every shot found its mark, smashing through decks, tearing men apart, setting the rigging ablaze. For an hour, the battle raged. The pirate brigantine darted like a cornered beast, turning sharply, trying to slip into shallow waters where the frigate dared not follow. Twice they nearly escaped. Twice the frigate cut across their path, its sails blackened by smoke but unyielding, its cannons relentless. At last, the pirates made their gamble. With their hull torn and their masts trembling, they surged forward, closing the distance. Grappling hooks soared through the air, embedding in the Navy's rigging. With cutlasses raised and pistols primed, they leapt onto the enemy's deck, screaming like demons unleashed. The clash that followed was more slaughter than battle. Steel met steel, pistols fired at arm's length, and the deck ran red. Pirates fought like men who knew the rope awaited them either way, each strike fueled by desperation. The Navy held their ground, disciplined lines breaking into brutal melee. By the time the sun fully cleared the horizon, the sea was littered with corpses, the water stained crimson. The frigate stood battered but unbroken, its flag still high. The pirate brigantine, crippled and smoking, drifted aimlessly, her crew cut down to a handful. And in that dawn light, one truth rang clear across the Caribbean. The days of unchecked piracy were ending. But the pirates were not done yet. They would bleed the Navy at every turn, for they knew that though they might die, they would die as outlaws, not subjects. The war at sea had only just begun. The pirates had a banner as dreadful as the Navy's was proud. The Union Jack stood for order, empire, and the King's unyielding authority. The Jolly Roger, the red flag of no quarter, stood for defiance, chaos, and death. When those two flags met upon the sea, there could be no peace, only annihilation. Word spread through the Caribbean of battles that turned the ocean into a grave. Off the coast of Jamaica, a sloop flying the red flag refused to surrender, even when outgunned 3-1. Its crew fought to the last man, singing as they bled upon the deck, until the Navy reduced the ship to splinters. Yet not a soul begged for mercy. To the very end, they remained outlaws unbroken. In Nassau, the last great stronghold of the pirates, the Union Jack rose over the harbor, enforced by musket and cannon. The age of lawlessness was choking on its final breaths. But still, some captains refused to kneel. They raised the Jolly Roger higher, not as a banner of victory, but as a challenge. If the Navy wanted the seas, they would have to earn them in blood. One infamous encounter told of Charles Vane's ship squaring off against a Royal Navy frigate in a storm. Lightning split the sky as the two exchanged fire, the thunder of cannon mingling with the roar of the heavens. For hours they battered each other, until the pirate ship, crippled, vanished into the rain, leaving the Navy to wonder if it had faced men or phantoms. Blackbeard himself became the symbol of this defiance. Tales of his ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, clashing with Navy hunters spread like wildfire. His crew painted themselves in ash, tied slow-burning fuses into their beards, and set them alight during battle, becoming walking demons in the smoke. To the Navy, he was not a man but a monster, and the very sight of his black flag sent shivers through disciplined lines. Yet even legends can bleed. The Navy's reach grew longer, its grip tighter. For every pirate that slipped through the net, 2 more were dragged back in chains. The gallows groaned under the weight of captured men, their bodies left to rot as a warning to others. But the pirates understood one truth the Navy could not erase. Fear was a weapon sharper than any cutlass. So long as the red flag flew, even once, even for a single battle, the legend would live. And in that legend, they found immortality. The war was entering its final act. The seas had grown darker, the stakes higher. For both flags, only one fate remained: victory or oblivion. It was off the coast of North Carolina that the final curtain began to fall. The Royal Navy had chased the pirates across every corner of the Caribbean, from the shallow banks of the Bahamas to the blood-soaked waters near Jamaica. One by one, the great captains had fallen, hanged at Port Royal, shot at sea, or betrayed by their own. Only a handful remained, but they burned brighter for it, defiant even as the noose tightened. The most infamous of all was Edward Teach, Blackbeard. His ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, had struck terror across the seas, her black sails looming like a storm cloud on the horizon. But now the Navy had cornered him. Lieutenant Robert Maynard, commanding 2 well-armed sloops, sailed into the inlets where Blackbeard's ship lay waiting. The tide was low, the waters treacherous, but Maynard pressed forward, knowing this was the moment to end the legend. At dawn, the battle began. Blackbeard's cannons roared first, tearing into the Navy's hulls, shattering planks and drenching the decks with blood. Smoke choked the air, and the cries of dying men echoed across the waves. Still, Maynard pressed on, his ships crippled but not broken. With grappling hooks and cutlasses, the 2 forces collided. On the deck of the Adventure, Blackbeard's final ship, chaos reigned. Pirates fought like demons, their eyes wild, their bodies painted with powder and sweat. The Navy surged back with discipline, muskets firing at point-blank range, bayonets plunging into flesh. In the heart of it stood Blackbeard himself, towering, his beard aflame with smoldering fuses, his eyes burning through the smoke. He fought like a man possessed, swinging his cutlass with inhuman fury. Witnesses swore he shrugged off wounds that would have killed another, cuts to his arms, his neck, even a musket ball to his chest. He seemed unstoppable, a figure born of nightmare rather than flesh. But even legends bleed. Surrounded, struck again and again, Blackbeard finally faltered. It took more than 20 wounds, 5 bullets, countless slashes before the giant fell. His head was severed and hung from Maynard's ship as proof the demon of the Caribbean was no more. With his death, the age of the pirates truly ended. The gallows claimed the rest, and the seas grew quiet, ruled once more by kings and crowns. Yet the outlaws won something the Navy never could. For though their bodies rotted on the noose and their ships sank beneath the waves, their names lived on. Blackbeard, Vane, Bonny, Rackham, their legends refused to die. They haunted every wave, every storm, every whisper of treasure buried where no law could reach. The Royal Navy claimed victory, but the pirates claimed immortality. And to this day, when the black flag flutters in a sailor's dream, the sea reminds him of a truth no empire can bury. Outlaws fall, but legends never sink.